We talked about it last week. UFC 290, massive weekend for the UFC International Fight Week, highlighted on Saturday night by UFC 290. Man, Alexander Volkanovski versus our boy Yair Rodriguez. Fights of the year all over the thing, man. It was just a wild card. What were your guys' thoughts on it?
It was awesome.
Yeah,
it was. I mean, it was
perfect.
It was an amazing event. They always go all out for International Fight Week, and this was one of the better.
It was exactly what they wanted. Like, you had to have a real discussion with yourselves behind closed doors. Like Dana White trying to figure out who was fight of the night. That was probably really hard.
Yeah.
Jalen Turner and Dan Hooker brought it.
Brandon Moreno and Alejandro Pantoja, which was fight of the night.
That was great.
That was an incredible. Like, okay, before we. I'm not going to go on too long of a monologue here, but before we get too far, the flyweight division has made such, and it's not even a resurgence, it's just a surgence. Like, this was a division that they scrapped. And then a division that Demetrius Johnson, who is one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, they literally traded him for Ben Askren because flyweight did no money, no dollars. It was irrelevant. And honestly, Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo revitalized this division into what it is now. Their quadrilogy that they had, it changed the game. And now it's like every fight we see at flyweight is incredible. Whether it's Moreno or Pantoja, Figueiredo is probably going up to bantamweight. Brandon Royval, Kaikar France, like it's become an incredible division, and this just furthered that sentiment. I mean, Brandon Moreno and Alejandro Pantoja, guys that have fought twice. Once that counted. Once was on The Ultimate Fighter, but they fought back in 2018. Both guys have, found their way back in. Moreno, obviously, getting two wins over Davison Figueiredo and becoming just a huge star for the UFC. Obviously, being Mexican-born, is great with the Mexican fans. Like, they show up and show out at every event that Brandon Moreno takes part in.
I love that guy.
I do too. It's hard not to love Brandon Moreno. And Pantoja brought it. And this fight could have went either way. I believe it was a split decision for Pantoja, but it was just...
Pantoja was just so relentless,
dude, man. He didn't stop.
Took him down 6 times.
Yeah, and he didn't care how much he was getting hit because Brandon Moreno's boxing is so good. And Pantoja knocked him down in the first round.
Yep.
In the first round, he scored a knockdown on Brandon Moreno, who's one of the better boxers in the UFC. So... Before we get too far into it, I just want to recognize that the flyweight division is legit.
I was sad to see Brandon Moreno get knocked off, but at the same time, Pantoja was just unbelievable.
You think they run it back?
I think they're gonna. I think they're gonna give Brandon Royval a shot first.
Really?
And run it back with Brandon Moreno.
Before we even got to the main card, though, Robbie Lawler went out with a bang. Nico Price should be ashamed of himself.
But
man, he got wrecked. Dirty boxing. That uppercut.
Uppercut was. It was beautiful.
It was.
And you can't not, as a fight fan, you can't not love Robbie Lawler.
Yeah.
Like, Robbie Lawler is the man. He's been a professional fighter since he was 19 years old. And the way that most of these guys, especially the guys that, were back then in Pride, K1, all these guys that have been fighting for decades plus and were, fighting before the UFC became what it is now, they go out on their backs. They go out with, knockout after knockout after knockout, and you feel bad for him.
I didn't think Robbie was going to win that fight, though.
I didn't either. Robbie hasn't looked great. He hasn't had much of a gas tank in his last couple fights. Like, Brian Barberena just walked him down a couple fights ago, and it was like...
Nico let him get inside, though, and just knocked him out. It's like he took a tumble almost.
And then what they did after...
He got smacked.
The video that they showed after, and Robbie, was really trying to keep it together after the knockout, and then once they showed the tribute video, he just kind of fell apart. For one of those guys that's just been consummate pro, a incredible fighter, and constantly in amazing nonstop action fights. My favorite fight of all time, Rory McDonald and Robbie Lawler.
Ooh.
Brutal war, but just such a fun fight to watch. So it was cool.
Their faces, that was full hamburger meat.
Yeah, it was bad, but it was cool. It was cool to see Robbie Lawler go out on top and not, another one of these guys that just waited too long. And he probably did wait too long. But he got to end it on a knockout with a win. I think it was like 28 seconds. Maybe his second fastest knockout in his career. comes in his final fight. So yeah, it was a cool
And
way
then
to cap it
Bo
off.
Nickel, poor Val Woodburn, man. That dude was cutting grass 3 days before that.
That man drew.
I felt bad. Did you see the videos though?
Of what?
Of him showing up. He didn't have a team with him.
Yeah,
he's just a lone wolf in it.
Trayshawn Gore, I think, fell out like on Wednesday.
Yeah,
like Tuesday or Wednesday.
and he was cutting grass.
Yeah.
And he was
bad.
the second guy to fill in for Trayshawn Gore. The first guy got that MRI done, and they found the brain.
No,
situation.
that's who was fighting Jack Della Maddalena.
Oh, you're right. My
That
bad.
was Josiah Harrell, who was filling in
You're
for
right.
Sean Brady against Jack Della.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you kind of knew that Woodburn was getting
Good
fed to
old
the
Val,
wolves,
bro.
and
I felt bad
Bo
for
Nickel
dude.
made light work and
Yeah.
got to show off the hands. But it's just like,
it's like if he can do that consistently, good Lord, Scott.
I mean, he's a problem already.
Yes, but
and they're
if
going to
he's-
slow burn
If he
him.
throws hands,
They're going to slow burn him. We won't see him take on a top 15 guy for a while, which I think is fair. I mean, the guy's 5-0. He has 5 professional fights.
Yep.
So he's going to be a big superstar. Give him the slow burn, let him build it up. And then, potentially he has, potential to be a champion one day. So it was a good way to start it.
Yep.
Everybody likes Bo Nickel. He's a big draw already. And to see him with a very quick knockout, it's a fun way to start it. And then immediately
Jalen Turner.
And Dan Hooker.
Good Lord. Well, Jalen Turner just ran out of steam.
He ran out. It looked like he was going to steamroll Dan Hooker.
Yeah.
Looked like he was going to walk right through him. And then, like, in the middle of that second round, Dan Hooker flipped a switch, and he did not take his foot off the gas.
That's double the fights, though, of Jalen Turner. That's what that showed.
Yes. Yeah.
He's fought 2 times the fights.
And it's hard, dude. It's hard not to feel good for Dan Hooker. Like, I love Jalen Turner. I think Jalen Turner I know he's lost his last 2. He lost to Gamrot in his last fight and then lost to Dan Hooker. The sky's the limit for the potential of Jalen Turner. Just the body type that he has for lightweight is absurd and what he can do. But it's hard not to feel good for Dan Hooker. Like, it wasn't that long ago that he was right there competing for a title shot. Him and Dustin Poirier went down to the wire in an incredible fight. And then he kind of had fallen off after that with, I think he had had lost maybe 3 of his last 4 since Chandler knocked him out. He just hadn't been able to get in the win column, and then he pulled it off.
I did feel bad. Robert Whitaker got ran through by Dricus Duplessis, and I didn't really see that coming. But I mean, Duplessis after that, they're going to have the Duplessis, I should say. They're going to have the South African versus Israel Adesanya. That was that meeting at the middle of the ring was kind of.
It was cringe.
It was intense, but it was very cringy.
It was cringe, but I'm not saying it was cringy. I was like,
they're trying to build up the fight.
It's gonna be a heck of a fight, and like
they sort of it got racial. Yeah. But I get it. He's like, I'll show you who the real African is.
Well,
It's
there's
like,
history there, right?
Yeah, no, I get it, and he's South African, Dricus Duplessis. So like,
right,
yeah,
it's just strange, but it's just weird.
It was.
Like,
it did have that of just like why is
and
it
then
gotta
Dana
go
White trying to act like there was no racial undertones with it after in the press conference.
a little
Of course
weird.
he didn't. You know, of course
it was a little weird. Yes, it was. But like
that's Dana's calling card. He'll avoid that.
I love seeing fights where there's true bad blood.
Yeah,
like where dudes just truly don't like each other, because you don't get that much anymore. And I'm not saying I wish every fight was like that. I love martial arts in general, and it is a sport that is built on respecting your opponent and all that. And you see a lot of that, and it is in very good taste. And I don't know, it just brings a feeling that the old UFC didn't have, when it was all grudge matches and everybody hated each other. But still, it's hard not to get fired up when 2 dudes genuinely
and
don't
Dana
like each
loves
other.
because he gets to tell the story. He gets to
and it's a good story.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is I feel like that's not. I mean, that's Paolo versus. That's Paolo versus
Izzy. That's what we were talking about after the fight.
Just
it's like
big, strong,
marching forward,
puncher.
knockout artist. Yeah. But that's what we said too. Is like, man, this Izzy hasn't been like this since Paulo Costa. Like, obviously he and Pereira had their stuff.
Yeah.
But there was respect.
Yeah, there was respect at the end.
Him and Paolo, there was no respect there, and it does.
I don't think he respects Duplessis at all.
I don't think he does either, and I think he's going.
Yeah, and I think there's good reason, because I think he'll beat the hell out of him.
Yes, I do too. I think he doesn't stand a chance. Bobby Knuckles didn't look right. Like, Robert Whitaker just didn't look right.
I don't think he was strong.
I thought
enough.
he got hurt.
And
I thought he hurt.
Did he?
I thought he hurt his knee. They didn't say anything about transporting him or an injury to him or anything. Also, Dan Hooker broke his freaking wrist.
Yes.
in the second round. And Brandon Moreno broke his hand in the first round. So dudes are just absurd.
They're ridiculous.
But he just didn't. I don't know. He
didn't look strong.
He planted weird on his, and I think he tore his MCL twice, both against Yoel, and both Yoel Romero fights. I think he tore his MCL. But he planted weird, and then when Duplessis had that takedown, his knee was locked out.
Yeah.
And it kind of looked like it might have been hyperextended. But regardless,
when they had
right.
any ground exchanges, like you thought Robert Whitaker would be able to handle that, and he just didn't look strong.
Dreykus
he just looked
huge.
I understand that, but at the same time, Robert Whitaker can usually deal with himself even around another dude that's strong as hell.
Whitaker's not really a weight cutter either, because he used to fight at 170, so he's not a weight cutter, and Dreykus clearly cuts a lot of weight. He's a big...
That dude's probably like, what,
probably 215, 220. Yeah, he's a big freaking dude. So that fight did not live up to my expectation. But it was a good fight, and I think this is the best outcome for the UFC.
Yeah.
Because they weren't going to run Robert Whitaker and Izzy back again, so it gives Izzy fresh meat. That fight's probably going to take place before the end of this year. I heard someone saying, what if they put this on the John Jones Stipe
They said
card?
9 weeks, didn't they?
I think they're shooting for September because it's in Australia.
Yeah.
And that's like Australia's a huge draw for the UFC. Izzy beat Whitaker there for the title in 2018. And I think that was the biggest crowd the UFC had ever had, maybe like 32,000 or something like that. So we'll see. I think they'll get it done before the end of the year. We know how active Izzy is, but
Volk, speaking of active, that's why I have so much respect for Alexander Volkanovski. He's so active. And he tried to go up a weight class just this year, and it didn't work out. He comes right back down and just dominates Yair.
Yeah.
Was not worried about anything Yair was throwing at him.
This is a guy, like when I watch Volk, you think this is a guy that's trained MMA all of his life.
Yep.
No, this dude was a professional freaking rugby player. Like he was not... He's not an MMA guy.
I thought when he came out, too, he just came land down under. Yeah. And he was just sort of running out there. He didn't look like all that hyped up. It doesn't matter.
He knows how good he is, man.
Yeah.
He knows how good he is everywhere. Striking, ground. He is good everywhere. Like
I had a buddy mid-fight
he knocked out Yair.
I had a buddy mid-fight text me. He's like, he's taking the easy way out. I'm like, first of all, shut the hell up. If you have an opponent that can't handle getting taken to the ground, you take him to the ground. That's how it works.
And he beat him on the feet.
I was going to say that in the third round,
he beat him on the feet.
You still think he's taking the easy way out?
Right.
And knocked his ass out.
Yeah. And he really didn't take much damage. Like, he took a couple of good shots.
Nothing for real.
Yair's combinations are beautiful.
But
they are beautiful. Like how
he was outclassed. He was outclassed.
Yes, he was
the full MMA.
Volk was just clearly the better fighter. But I like watching Yair, man. He's fun to watch. The way he puts kicks on the end of his combinations, how quick they are, and how just unpredictable is beautiful. But there's levels to it.
Yes.
And Volk is the top. I think Volk probably deserves pound for pound.
That's what I was going to say. There was a debate about him or John Jones, and I'm like, here's the thing. Like, people will talk about John Jones going up a weight class and Volk doing that and losing, John finishing a fight in 30 seconds. I'm sorry. I view Islam Makhachev in his weight class at a different level than I'd view Cyril Gane at heavyweight. Yeah. Like Cyril Gane, Islam is just like the peak of everything you could imagine.
And you can make an argument that Volk beat him. I thought Volk won that fight.
I don't know. It was close.
Very close.
But point being, I think Cyril Gane and Islam Makhachev in their respective weight classes, there's different levels. And the fact that Volk was even close with a dude that much bigger than him and that skilled, I mean, you got to give him his credit.
Right. And so now he's either going to fight Ilias.
And he's been more active. We're talking about one fight for John Jones in the past, 3 years?
3 years, yeah.
So, like, I think for now, just off principle, he should be pound for pound number one.
And now we get to see him either go back up to 55 and fight Makhachev again, which no one's going to complain about that because that fight was...
Yes.
That is one of the most beautiful fights I've ever seen in my life of just true
technical
martial artists just going at it. Two of the best in the world going at it. No one's going to complain about them running that back.
I mentioned this to you guys when we were texting back and forth. It just trips me out. 3 times he beat Max.
Yep.
And then he beats Yair, and he's 5'6". Like you shouldn't imagine him being some good like. He should not be able to beat world class strikers at 5'6".
At 5'6",
and he does.
Yeah.
Consistently.
Yeah. No, Volk is the featherweight GOAT. Like he beat Jose Aldo, who was the GOAT for a long time. Then it was Max Holloway, who was the GOAT.
He
beat him 3 times. And then, I mean, just what else he's done, throughout that time and the guys that he's knocked off, and he just continues to build that resume and build that legacy. And He's 34 years old, but it doesn't look like he's slowing down anytime soon. Ilya Taporia, they face off after
There's
going to
get a point, though. I don't know, man. Obviously, he might fight Makhachev again, but at his weight class right now, I feel like it could just get stale and boring for him.
Oh, I mean, if he cleans out Ilya Taporia, then he's done. He has nothing else.
Yeah.
And Taporia is a little bit further down the list.
And that's why he's tried to go up.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's ran through everybody.
And he's still, like, why... He's a star now in the UFC. Like, why does he choose to be so damn active? Just cause? For the love of the game?
For the love of the game. That's what he was talking about in the post-fight press conference. He was like, I genuinely love doing this. Like, I love this. And I want, like, he's having a procedure done on his shoulder. And he's like, I'm fighting before the end of the year still. Like,
it's crazy,
I'm
man.
doing it. Like,
you got to have some respect for a guy.
Yeah, you have to
that
respect
does that.
active champions. Izzy's super active. Volk, super active. Like, active champions are what
That's
allows
the
UFC to be so good. You have to have champions that are willing to fight. Kamaru Usman was an extremely active champion. He would fight all the time too. So having guys that will step out there and they don't care who you put in front of them because they know they're that good, you have to have those guys.